Massive pole shifts are cyclical, a declassified CIA document reveals. It's the Adam and Eve story, according to Michael Salla. Ben Davidson, founder of Space Weather News, began his six-part Earth catastrophe cycle series discussing a 57-page booklet called The Adam and Eve Story, authored by Chan Thomas, which was classified by the CIA at some point after the 1963 publication, and declassified in part in June 24, 2013, with the release of a sanitized digital version on the CIA's website. Thomas's analysis of cyclical pole shifts was different in key respects to what was being proposed at the time by Charles Hapgood in his seminal book, The Earth's Shifting Crust, written in 1958. And according to Davidson, it was Thomas more accurate, as accurately explaining for how a pole shift happens, which led the CIA declassifying Thomas's book, The Adam and Eve Story, first published 1963 by Emerson House, with a third edition published in 1965, and then republished by Bengal Tiger Press in 1993. It's not clear when, why, and how the CIA classified Thomas's book, and the fact that the CIA chose to release the declassified, sanitized version in 2013. It's very significant. Davidson contrasts Hapgood's wandering pole hypothesis with a pole shift described in the CIA suppressed book by Thomas. Hapgood wrote of a pole shift of about 40 degrees that could recur every 5,000 years. Well, that's not too long, is it? Every 5,000 years or so in the Earth's shifting crust, where earlier geographical poles would wander on the Earth's surface with each crustal displacement. Instead, Thomas wrote of a massive shift of almost 90 degrees that would move both poles into the tropics in less than 1 day, and then back to their earlier polar positions after the next cycle. In a quarter to a half a day, the poles move almost to the equator, can you imagine? And all hell lets loose. The atmosphere and oceans don't shift with the shell, they just keep rotating west to east, and at the equator, that speed is 1,000 miles an hour. It has to be normally to make one rotation per day, so while the shell shifts with the poles going towards the equator, the winds and oceans go eastward, blowing across the face of the Earth with supersonic speeds, inundating continents with water miles deep. You can see then that ice ages are not a matter of advancing and retreating ice. It's simply that different areas of the Earth are in polar regions at different times, for different durations of time, with the changes between positions taking place in a fraction of a day. This is from the Adam and Eve Story, page 13 to 14. Can you imagine? Thomas provided a table illustrating how the North Pole, for example, would switch back and forth between northern hemisphere regions after experiencing close to a 90-degree tilt. It's Thomas's conclusion of cyclic pole shifts of almost 90 degrees that flip the poles back and forth over millennia that Davidson identified as the key reason the CIA classified Thomas's work. If the north and south poles flipped back and forth 90 degrees, there would be little evidence of previous pole shifts, since these would be buried under thick layers of ice, obviously. This takes us to the science of paleomagnetics, the study of the record of the Earth's magnetic field in rocks, minerals, or archaeological materials, which has been used to determine the historic movement of the Earth's magnetic poles. Davidson cited a number of scholarly articles which studied paleomagnetic data from volcanic hotspots, a highly regarded 1985 paleomagnetic study titled True Polar Wander, an analysis of Cenozoic and Mesozoic paleomagnetic poles, found the pole has moved 22 degrees, or 10 degrees in the past 180 million years. This was far less than the 40-degree wander pole hypothesis that Hapgood proposed in the approximate 5,000-year period. A subsequent 2001 study titled Stability of the Earth with Respect to the Spin Axis for the Last 130 Million Years, concluded that the time averaged position of the spin axis has deviated by no more than 5 over the last 130 million years, indicating that mantle mass heterogeneities have not changed rapidly enough to drive the polar wonder, TPW for short. Davidson cited these in a 2018 study as the key elements of the body of scientific evidence refuting Hapgood's wandering pole hypothesis. However, as Davidson pointed out, the scientific data from paleomagnetic studies did not address Thomas's theory of the poles flipping back and forth over geologic time, thereby giving the appearance that the poles had not moved over millions of years, as researchers had mistakenly concluded. All work crushing the theory utilizes these flawed studies, especially the long-term average pole position, and none address the problem of a ping-pong shift where you would have that time average pole position appearing to be in the same position over millions of years. Davidson goes as far as suggesting that Hapgood, who worked for the CIA's predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services during World War II, conducted a limited hangout in his 1958 book to get some of the truth out into the public arena, but doing so in a way that could be eventually discredited. Davidson cited a 1994 book titled World in Peril about the once classified information provided by an Arctic polar explorer, Major Maynard White, who told his son Ken, the book's author, about secret Pentagon meetings in 1948 where suppression of evidence of cyclic pole shift was discussed. At one of the scientific meetings with Major White attended in the Pentagon in early 1948, the scientists discussed the availability of alerting the public to the pending polar flip phenomenon. None of the scientists would agree to withhold the information from the public, but on the other hand, neither could they agree on how to release it. The knowledge of this phenomenon, some felt, could in itself destroy the moral fiber of society. Their fears were apparently unfounded when, in the early 1950s, information about the flip phenomenon was released in both a newspaper column and a magazine article, but surprisingly generated no responses from an apparent stunned parochial or incredulous public. Given the amount of scientific data presented by Davidson in his Earth Catastrophe Cycle series, it's clear that physical pole shifts of apparently 90 degrees have been historically recorded, and that this became known to government authorities as early as 1948 in the United States, that is. And this is from Solask. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.